Okay. Pop quiz? Nah. Mom quiz. Are you here? Now that's a question that kicks off the entire Paul Leslie Hour. Each time, every time. I say, are you here? And we hear from people around the world who answer in the affirmative. So far, nobody has said, we're not here. This is episode 1020 of the Paul Leslie Hour. It's a show that, according to the survey data, is listened to at the gym. That's number one. Number two is in a vehicle, from cars to semi-trucks. Next, on the job, working. You got that? So where do you listen from? Okay, we're just about to get the interview going. We've got jazz guitar great Lee Ritenour back again. Oh my, you're going to listen to this. Good to have him back. He'll be talking with Paul about his new album with Dave Grusin entitled Brasil. Lee Ritenour is not just an extraordinary musician. He's also a great guy, just like Dave. And in addition to thanking you, which we do much appreciate, we'd like to invite you to be a friend and supporter. Simply visit www.thepaulleslie.com/support. Wow, that easy. And we thank you. Paul's given me that high sign, that okay sign. He's been told not to do that. But here we are anyway. Hey, let's start her up.
Hello.
Hey, it's me. How are you, Lee?
Fine, Paul. How are you doing?
Doing good. Good to talk to you again.
Nice to speak with you again. Yeah.
Well, I think you deserve an appropriate introduction.
All right.
We're welcoming back a great guitarist and recording artist. And along with Dave Grusin, he has a record out entitled Brasil.
Appropriately, so right.
I think everyone out there should know that your connection to Brazilian music is by no means a superficial one.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think it goes all the way back to when I was a teenager, because growing up in Los Angeles and falling in love with the guitar when I was a little kid, 8 years old, and then as I got into my teens, I think that's when the first time I heard the Stan Getz, Astrid Gilberto, João Gilberto playing that incredible hypnotic bossa nova guitar style. And, you know, compared to, I mean, there was great guitar playing going on in the world in general with jazz and rock and blues, but nothing like, I hadn't heard anything. And most people, you know, in that contemporary world back then, it was very fresh to hear the bossa nova done so cool like that with Astrid Gilberto and Stan Getz and João Gilberto and of course Antonio Carlos Jobim. So I fell in love with that style right away and tried to emulate it a little bit. But then a few years later, I think I was in my late teens, I met Oscar Castro-Neves, a great guitarist with Sergio Mendes. And Oscar lived in Los Angeles, and we became friends. And he started showing me more of the Brazilian rhythms. And then by the time I was 27, I guess. No, before that, I was in my mid 20s, maybe just 25 or 26. I went down to Brazil and recorded some tracks for the album that eventually came out as Rio. I continued just to have a love affair with Brazil. Ended up marrying a Brazilian lady, and Carmen, and have my son is half Brazilian. Everybody speaks fluent Portuguese except me.
Can you give us just a little bit of an idea, a snapshot of recording this album?
Yeah, well, I think for Dave Grusin and I, we wanted to do another duet project. We had done the Harlequin album in 1985, a long time ago. It was a very successful album for us, and it was the beginning of his record company with his partner Larry Rose at GRP Records, which fawned, most of the contemporary and straight-ahead jazz artists at one point or another on their label. And Harlequin was one of the earlier albums that kicked off the label. And Dave and I recorded in Los Angeles primarily that album, and guested Yvonne Lynn's guest with us, who was a up-and-coming songwriter at the time. and singer, and then we used the great Carlos Vega, who passed away later, and Jimmy Johnson on bass, and those guys later would play with James Taylor for a lifetime, and so it was a great project. And Dave and I did many projects and road experiences since then, but we were overdue to do another Brazilian project, and the friend who helped put it together and was executive producer, Michael Lazarga, said, "What do you guys want to do?" And I said, "Well, I think from what I know from the players down there in Brazil," and I meant the rhythm section players, not the stars that were more obvious, the Ivan Linses and Caetano Velosos and those, and João Boscos, those kind of people, but the actual players. Wes, my son, kept telling me about Ada Ribeiro, the drummer, and this singer named Tatiana Parra, who could sing anything, and so.
And Tatiana Parra, she's the singer we hear on Victorious.
Yeah, exactly.
You and Dave have been working together for years and years now. I think he has a birthday coming up.
That's right. A bunch of us are headed to his ranch in Montana to celebrate his 90th birthday. One of the most fantastic things about Dave Grusin, he's always, ever since I've known him and we met when I was a teenager, he's always been incredibly sharp and smart and on it and focused and just an extraordinary mind, if you will. And of course, just an incredible music talent. And what's great about, as he reaches 90 years old, he was doing this album in Brazil, playing with all these guys, basically most of them around in their 40s. And he was just holding his own, making great music. And you can tell from the record, he sounds great. And we all know 90-year-olds in our life that aren't doing so well. And Dave is an anomaly, and he's, like my son Wes, who's 30, and we hang out on the road. And Wes says, "I feel like I'm talking to a 50-year-old." He's just one of the guys, and so he's so sharp. So it's nice to see that he has retained. Is he the same as when he's 30? He was 33 years old. He would be the first to tell you no, but he is incredibly sharp. So it's great to be on the road with him and hang out with them and go to dinner and make records and travel. And he's a very special guy.
Brazilian music is something that has really captivated a lot of musicians. I think of Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett. He also recorded Milton Nascimento songs. And I remember talking to the now gone George Duke, and he said, "I could be half Brazilian." So what is it about Brazilian music? Could you put it into words?
Well, I think probably I'm speaking for a lot of us. I think first of all, the language, the Portuguese language, is one of the most melodic languages in the world. Of course, a lot of it comes from Portugal, in Europe. And then you combine it with the Latin American side of things, and you have a Portuguese that is more rhythmical than almost any language in the world, certainly much more than English. And so the lyricists and the songwriters, when they were writing music, the actual music notes and the music chords and the lyrics, all three very easily come together. I mean, not automatically, but, people are able to create these great songs and great melodies and great lyrics and it has a lot to do with the Portuguese language. On top of that, when the 60s came around, by that time, a lot of the songwriters were, of course, listening to American music because American music was having an incredible impact around the world. And jazz musicians and jazz songwriters, when you think of people like Bill Evans and people from that period, they were writing great compositions that would later, in some cases, become standards. And so the Brazilian songwriters and the singer-songwriters took the jazz harmonies from America, combined it with the lyricism of their language, and the great melodies that they could write, which was, again, came from the deep Brazilian interest in music around the world, and especially American music. And it just ended up being a very special combination.
You have a couple of Milton Nascimento songs on this album. And for anybody out there, that is a rabbit hole you can definitely go down. Tell us a little bit about him and your connection to his music.
Well, I heard Milton, again, when I was in my 20s. He was doing these records in New York. Also, sometimes Herbie Hancock, a very young Herbie Hancock, would come to Brazil and record with some of the Brazilian players and definitely collaborate with Milton Nascimento. Milton was a songwriter that probably had more connections in a way to jazz than some of the others. And later, of course, Yvonne Lins would, and João Bosco, and Caetano Veloso, and Giovan, and Gilberto Gil, but they were also a little more slightly folkloric and more pop-oriented. Milton, I think, always had a love affair for more of the sophistication. So it came out in his records, and Creed Taylor and Herbie Hancock and all these people Milton was going to New York, and the New Yorkers were going to Brazil. It was some very special records that were being made back then. So as a teenager and in my 20s, I fell in love with Milton's music. I only got to work with him on the International Jazz Day a couple times, one specifically at the White House during the Obama administration, and that was a very special day. And Milton always I think he felt a little shy because of his lack of English skills, and we equally felt shy because of our lack of Portuguese skills. So I never got to really hang out and talk to him as much, but I'm just such a huge fan of him, and I hope he's enjoying what we did with Cravo e Canela, his song, which starts off the album, and Catavento, his other tune on the record.
Well, Lee Ritenour, it seems like you have done just about everything someone could imagine that a person could do with a guitar. Is there anything that remains? Is there anything you would like to do that you haven't yet?
Well, the funny thing is that the guitar keeps getting reinvented. It is I think it is the most versatile instrument in the world. It starts out as an accompaniment instrument and a folkloric instrument, and then it evolved into all the different areas that the guitar is famous for, including classical, flamenco, folk, jazz, rock, blues, you name it, right? And I had a love affair with the guitar since I was a little kid, and growing up in Los Angeles, I fell in love with Wes Montgomery and Kenny Burrell and Jim Hall and Joe Pass and all these great jazz players. At the same time, Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck were coming, and Eric Clapton and B.B. King. And so how could you not fall in love with all that kinds of music? And so to answer your question, there isn't anyone specifically that I have a dream to work with, but every day there's a new incredible talent that I get turned on to, either by listening to music myself or having my son turn me on to it, or somebody else. And the guitar just, I just get excited about meeting other guitar players and making music with them. Everybody
check out the record. Lee Ritenour and Dave Grusin, Brasil. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, and good talking to you, and hope to see the fans, and we're going to be playing this record around the world with a European tour coming up, and then an Asian tour, and then more U.S. dates as we go around along the year.
For all those tour dates, it's LeeRitenour.com, Ritenour.
Absolutely.
All right, Lee. Bye-bye now. Have a good one.
Bye-bye now. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.